Today it's a special day because in this week's Torah portion of Beshalach we divided the Torah portion to Aliyot, and today is the Aliyah. The Torah tells us the famous story of manna. Our ancestors wandered in the desert for 40 years, and how in the world they survived. The Torah tells us that it was manna from heaven. If you look at the Sidurim, for example, our Sidurim, the art scroll, you see at the very end of the Shacharit, of the morning prayer, a special section. It's called the section of the man. There are those who does the prayer of the manna on a daily basis. Others do it in this week, but for sure, the day that the Torah tells us the story of our strong faith in Hashem, manna from heaven, it's a great idea, the rabbis tells us, to read that part and the prayer at the end of Shacharit, at the end of the morning prayer in our Sidurim. What is all about? It's the idea that manna is from heaven. A person can do which called Hishtadlut. He or she has to make the effort to go out and make a living, but they always remember that there is Almighty God who provided the sustenance. The GEMARA tells us in Tractate Beitzah, page 16, that all the nourishment, kol mezonotav shel adam ktsuvim lo, all the nourishment of a person, it's a budgeted for him from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, excluding the three things: the Talmud Torah, the expenses of children's Jewish education, and another thing is the expenses of Shabbatot, expenses of the festival. These are the expenses that it's not part of that. And Rashi said, Klomar, it means he wants to dig in and say that it's excluding in the budget, which means we have a yearly budget, and in that budget, that's what they set up for us. Now it's up to our faith and merit to earn it. So with that in mind, we have to remember that manna came daily. The Torah said it had the taste of freshness and special, and the Midrash said each person have his own mindset when he received the manna, and therefore it tastes good. Even they ate in a way the same produce from heaven 40 years. The beauty of the idea of manna is the Friday. On Friday they have a double portion, which the source why we have double portion of challah on Shabbat. And Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses told the people, be careful on Shabbat not to go out and gather the manna. And those who not listen to him went out and not find anything, which again is the idea of faith. Some rabbis tells us that it was the feeling in the evening, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And that's the beauty of manna from heaven, that we created an atmosphere registered in our brain that eventually the final word belonged to God. God made decision who will be rich, who will be poor, who will be expanded his businesses and who is not. And therefore, to strengthen our faith, it's very important to say that section again at the end of a Shacharit morning prayer from the Sidur. It's applied to everyone, should make the time, shouldn't take long. And then is a special paragraph that speaks about strengthening of faith. In our Daf, in our page study today, again, indirectly also dealing with faith, but that's the second part of the Daf. The first part, 113 in Tractate Shabbat, will continue the halachot of a number one, tighten or untightening on Shabbat. We explain as an example is the tie. We can take it out with one hand or even two hands, and the difference between tying and untying in different robes. We're going to elaborate in different with the animals and people. And then the second section, Mitzvah Shem, we're going to deal a lot with a Agadata, Midrashic writing in regards to honor the Shabbat, and also a lot of Midrashic writings in regard to faith. We are the Mishnah, page 113a, 6 lines from the top of the page. קושרים דלי בפסיקיה, אבל לא בחבל, רבי יהודה מתיר. One may tie a bucket with a belt on Shabbat, but one may not tie a bucket with a rope, and Rabbi Yehuda allow it. So there is again, first and foremost, you have to remember that the concept is ancient, but soon you see the application. There is a pit, and there is a space that it's an empty space in that pit, and Rashi said here that the definition of psikia, it's he call it רצועה שקושרים מסביב לשוקיים. It's like long garments that people put around the body, and they put it at the front of that pit, and in that sense they psikia, which is the bucket they put at the front of that pit, you rub it with that materials, and then he pull it out. So the explanation in the Mefarshim, in Tosfot Arosh and Ramban, Rashba, Ritva, Aran, it's under the definition of regular tightening, but not kesher shel kayama. We explained yesterday, for those who are not familiar, kesher shel kayama in Hebrew, meaning you tightening something that it's permanent. Trace a scenario for those who are using a lice in their in the shoe, or tightening any box. So you have two ways to do it. You have one way to put it in a way that you can pull out the lace and you are ready, and there's another way you do it double or triple, and then it's very tight and it's almost impossible or very hard to untie it. The moment you do it in such a fashion, it's considering kesher shel kayama, which means that that's a permanent, and that's forbidden. But in that sense, the way that they put it at the front of the pit, they said, the first Tana said that you shouldn't do it with that belt, with the belt, but you can do it with a rope. And Rabbi Yehuda allow even with piskaya, even with the bucket, and later we explain. כלל אמר רבי יהודה, כל קשר שאינו של קיימה, אין חייבין עליו. Rabbi Yehuda tells us a principle. Any type of knot that's not permanent, it's not liable for trying it. There are two schools of thought here. One school of thought, it's like a dispute, and Rabbi Yehuda expresses his opinion, but most of the Mefarshim said, since the first section of the Mishnah dealing with exemption versus prohibition, therefore he used the same language, and he used the word en chayavim, which means one is not liable for tying it. So it means that he just elaborate of the previous point. If you look at the some of the Mefarshim, they say that we explained yesterday that if you untying something in one hand is not considering a permanent, and therefore that's the key point, that when you're using this type of tying, it's not permanent. Tosfot said here in the two different explanations, either because that's the section we used in the first part, as we said, but he said also, and that's what coming out of others like Ritva, Aran, Tosfot Arosh, he said that any type of robe, that's the key they want to drive. In a way, soon you see it in a practical halacha. Any type of using a rope to tie something you need, as long as it's not under category of permanent tying, it's not an issue. And that's basically what Rabbi Yehuda tried to say. He wants to clarify, to crystallize the difference in tying anything. tying in something that you can untie it easily versus tying something that is permanent. GEMARA said Hevel Demai. The dispute that we see in the Mishnah, what type of a rope, what kind of rope we are here in our discussion. So they said, Ilei Hevel de Alma, Rabbi Yuda Matir. If you tell me that it speaks about just a regular standard rope, so you tell me that Rabbi Yuda allow it, Kesher shel Kayamahu. What we just said in Rabbi Yuda, he said that what we allow is something that is not permanent. But if it's a regular robe and a person tying it, it's a permanent tying something. So so it can be that that's what the Mishnah is speaking, because the Mishnah was in a way vague. It wasn't clear what it's all about. Ela Hevel de Gardi. It has to be a weaver's rope. Why? Because the weavers needs to use it, and will untie it after Shabbat. So he needs it now, and he doesn't need it to pull out the water. He just needs it for weaving purposes. So Rabbi Yuda allowed it because he said that if you untie it the same day, it's fine. Soon you see an example, but just to give you a heads up, let's say you tie, but you intend to untie it after the services in the synagogue. After you come to the synagogue, you study Torah, you have the services, you come home, you untie it. That's fine. But the issue here we have is tying something in a permanent way. So he hold that Rabbi Yuda hold that since the person intend to untie it, it's weaving weaver ropes is not an issue. In your GEMARA, can you show the viewers just as an example of a Hebel or Gim? If you look at the picture, you see that there are two series of a thread that crisscross each other in such an angle. So the point is, one is called shti and one is called erev. So that's the way they used to do the weaving. The GEMARA soon will call it nol or gim, weaving loom. In very short, those of you who have GEMARot, especially those who have the Scharfenstein, you see at the very end, very end section, a page or two that gives you a very clear explanation of how exactly they used to do it. But since each one of these woven, it's made out of two, one it's called shti and one it's called erev, you see the top section and the bottom section, and they put it together. This issue of permanent or non-permanent matter. So here is the discussion. Lemeima de Rabbanan savre gazrinan chevel de gardi atu chevel de alma v'Rabbi Yuda savar lo gazrinan. Again, we divided here between things that you need for the Shabbat itself and needs that you need for other purposes. If you remember, we discussed yesterday and day before yesterday the problem, and soon you see it in another discussion, the problem of preparing in Shabbat for the following day, which is a problem. What we do allow is do any type of preparation or other thing that was of need for the same day. So here is the sages that they said, Gazrinan Hevel de Gardi, thing that you need to do it right away, which means they put a decree. They hold an issue decree, a prohibition, a weaver's rope, due to the standard rope. The Rabbi Yuda holds that that it's not an issue, because he divided between a woven robe and a regular robe. And again, woven robe has certain purposes. They have the way to tie it, they combine it by the two, and Rabbi Yuda holds that is two different categories. So now we want to clarify. Veraminhu. Now we bring another braita in a notion of juxtapose the braita with the Mishnah, And in that comparison, we try to show that the Braita basically contradicted the Mishnah. The Braita said, "Chevel dli shenifsak, lo yehe koshro, ela onvo." He said that a rope of a bucket that was severed on Shabbat. So one may not tie it with regard to knot, but he may tie a bow. What do you think? What's the difference between the two?
Bow is temporary, it's not permanent.
Bow is temporary and it's not permanent. And if you go to the next step, since we have one of the melachot, if you remember I showed you the picture yesterday of the melechet kosher, that one of the 39 melachot, we want to clarify what exactly the Torah meant. The Torah did not intend to impose more than its need. And the source of this is the Mishkan, is the tabernacle. The way that they did it in a weaving in a Mishkan, it was only in a sense of something that hold permanency, but that weaving situation. So Rabbi Yehuda disagreed, and he said, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Koreh chalav punga or piska. So Rashi said, this is like those pockets that they put money inside those box. And Rabbi Yehuda said, one may wrap a hollow belt around it and sash it as long as it does not tie it into a bow. So, Kashya de Rabbi Yehuda de Rabbi Yehuda, Kashya de Rabbanan a de Rabbanan. We have here in one hand the Mishnah. In the Mishnah the sages said that the regular robes are forbidden on Shabbat. And then Rabbi Yehuda allowed, with the exception of the robe of the weaving, the gardi. And now we're talking about tying. So you see that Rabbi Yehuda in one place he put a decree, another place not, and the sages one place put a decree, another place not. So you see, if you juxtapose, if you compare the Braita with the Mishnah, you see a conflict of the same people who said different things. So the GEMARA explained, and he said the Rabbanan lo kashya, chevel bechevel michlaf, aniva bekshira lo michalfa. So they said that the rabbis, with the one statement, another statement is not difficult, because a rope may be confused with another rope. Meaning, people, most of the people, do not differentiate with the rope. You went to service, so you know that part of training, they teach you how to use rope to tying things and different category of ropes. Most of the people are not aware of that. So if you have a rope that made specifically for weaving purposes versus other average person, according to this statement, not differentiate between the two, and people are very confused and confuse the both. So therefore they put a decree because they want to make sure that people not use the weaving, the gardi, the same as using other rope. However, aniva bikshira lo michalfa, but a bow, people are not confused with a knot. People know when it's come to tying, to do a bow or any type of tie, so they know that that's not really tying, it's just putting together the tie, versus if you do a regular knotting, people know that that's different. So that's one of the things that average person not mixing. So that's the solve of the appear contradiction between the Rabbanan and Rabbanan. Rabbi Yehuda lo kashya. Rabbi Yehuda is also one statement will not contradict the other. Why? Hatam lo mishum de michalfa aniva b'kshira, ela aniva gufa kshira. Rabbi Yehuda said that it's not because a bow may be confused with the knot. It's because a bow itself, it's a full-fledged knot and not prohibited due to a decree. So Rabbi Yehuda hold that if you take a tie, regular bow tie or regular tie, it's he hold that it's nothing. It's like regular doing tying on Shabbat. It's a very famous Rashi in Eruvim 97 that elaborate on that. But the sages said no. putting a tie, it's not considering anything. It's permissible, and it's important to know the final halacha, and that's even later we give the real final halacha. I just want to give you the point that Shulchan Aruch, the code in the Siman in the chapter 317, he brought, and that's the word of the Rema, that tying, it's not under the category of labor of kshira, it's not type of kosher. The only thing is, the Mishnah Berurah said 2 points. Point 1, when you're doing this tying on Shabbos morning, on Saturday morning, you prepare yourself, that's fine, but you can, you prepare it in order to tie it and untie it, but you cannot prepare on Shabbat in order to have it ready for celebration on Sunday. That's point 1. The Mishnah Berurah said another thing is that if you do something that you need to have double tying, double knotting, that's forbidden. So I can attest to that. One of the great teacher in Israel is Rabbi Nissim Karelitz. If you remember, last time I visited there, I spent a relatively long time with him. So Rabbi Nissim Karelitz, in his shul, I'm speaking many years ago, they used to tie the Sifrei Torah with a old-fashioned, how do you call it, rope, right? Not
rope, yeah.
Rope. Nowadays, if you look at the Sifrei Torah, most of the Sifrei Torah, they have this click that you put the together, punk, over, right? All time, they used to take, you remember that? They used to take a rope and tying it. So Rav Nissim Karelitz, which is a luminary posek in Israel, in Bnei Brak, he told in those years in his synagogue not to do it on Shabbos afternoon, for example. Shabbos afternoon we have a mincha, and they're taking sometimes a different Torah, or they're taking the Torah and then they're tying it. So he hold, if you do it on Saturday morning and you intend to untie it for the mincha, it's fine. But if you do it on mincha, you have to do it in such a fashion that you can untie it easily, but don't do it double. Right. Because doing it double, he hold that it's held as a permanent. Anyway, אמר רבי אבא, אמר רבי חייא ברש"י, אמר רב, מביא אדם חבל מתוך ביתו וקושרו בפרה ובאבוס. He said a person may bring a rope from inside his house on Shabbat and tie one end of it to a cow and the other to the throat. Why? So again, that's the ancient time, but you see a lot of application. You want in one hand to take out the cow, and on the other hand you don't want her to run away, so what do? You take you untie the one part around the head, and you put the other part in the throat, so it's not considered a permanent knot, because later he's going to untie, because you don't intend to have the cow standing there for whole Shabbat. Eiti veRabbi Acha Aricha. Aricha meaning is the name of someone who's a nickname for someone who's a very high, very tall, like my mayor. You know, everybody's surprised he's so tall, right? It was so high. Baruch Hashem. What? Tall, yes. Thank you. So the who Rabbi Abba Bar Papa le Rabbi Abba, we ask a question. חבל שבאבוס קושרו בפרה ושבפרה קושרו באבוס. So he said that a rope that is tied to the throat, one may tie it to a cow, and rope that in tied to the cow, one may tie it in a throat, provided that one does not bring the rope from inside his house and tie the cow outside. So that's usually the way that people does that. People are, in that sense, I don't know if I'm using the right term, but people are square-minded, most of the people. And people, when they untying something, they always start with the last one, which means if you tie once and try and twice, even in two different locations, most of the people are not going to untie the first one and then the second one. Most of the people start with the last one. So he said, Hatam chevel de alma, hacha chevel de gardi. So the Tosfot explained they permitted it because it's referred to weaver's rope, which will certainly be untied. So Tosfot have here two explanations, two school of thought. One is this, and the other one, he tried to make a connection between the two, between the cow and the avus, the throat. Now, since we discussed this weaver tool, now we are dealing with other tools that use in order to prepare some type of clothing. If it's a issue of muktzeh, that it's designated on Shabbat, like Rashi said, or it's okay. So the first one, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel klei kiva'ei mutar letaltelan b'Shabbat. He said that a weaver's tools may be moved on Shabbat. There is a category that it's called kli shemelachto le'isur. You're designating some tool for the purpose of something that is forbidden on Shabbat. So this weaver's tool, he holds that you're allowed to move it. The Rashi explained, if you need it for other purposes, because the fellow that does this weaving have designated that one for solely for weaving. So since that's the case, so he can carry it. The whole idea of kli shemelachto le'isur, if you have some type of tool that the purpose is something that is forbidden, if you need it for itself, then it's allowed. So that's what Rashi tried to say. So they said, be'umine Rav Yehuda, koved ha'elyon v'choved ha'tachton ma'u. If you remember, I showed you the picture. They have two parts in a shti and a erev when they tying it together. So he asked those parts that it's inside this weaver's loom, the upper beam and the lower beam of the weaver loom. So he asked, is that allowed to does the leniency apply to them or not? I said, ein velav veraf yabei. He said yes and no, and the matter is uncertain. Meaning, it's like saying yes and no, and the best is maybe. So he explained why. The idea is, there is one side that said yes, there's another side that said no, but therefore he doesn't know clearly in which direction to take. Itma Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel klei kiva'ei mutar letaltelan b'Shabbat afilu koved ha'elyon v'koved ha'tachton אבל לא את העמודים. He said that weaver's tool may be moved on Shabbat, even the upper beam and the lower beam, but not the posts. So they said that those two posts that they in the ground, they put these beams, the upper top, the bottom top, so you cannot move them on Shabbat for any other purposes. That's what Rashi said here. Amar le Rav Nachman, Rabba le Rav Nachman, Mishna amudim de lo. Said, what's the difference between posts that you not carry them? Ilema de ka'avid gumot, gumot mimela kahavya. If you tell me that the problem is that you make holes, there is one of the prohibition on Shabbat not to do holes in the ground because it's considering boneh. It's like a builder. It's a derivative from building. So he said, holes come into being on their own, that is not prohibited. Ditnan, and now we try to juxtapose from Kilaim to Shabbat. They said in Tractate Kilaim, the first one, משנה 9, הטומן לפת וצנונו תחת הגפן, אם מקצת עליו מגולין, אינו חושש, לא משום כליים ולא משום שביעית ולא משם מעשר וניטלים בשבת. He said that one who stores a turnip or radish in the ground beneath the vine of safekeeping, if some of its leaves were exposed, which is its access and making possible to grab the turnip or the radish and pull it off the ground, so it's not the issue. Not for the diverse kind, which is a kilaim, the violation of the planting food crops in a vineyard because there's no intent to plant them, nor do the prohibition against walking the land on the sabbatical year, the Shemitah, nor to the tie, that not picking the tie from that, not maybe not taken for ground on Shabbat, which is the rabbis do not putting any prohibition to do it concerned to anything that create a hole. In those days they used to put it in the ground, which means, let's say if you have a tomato and you want to store it, because if it's staying out, what happened? It's going to spoil in 2 or 3 days. So how it wasn't a refrigeration that you see in a modern time. So the best way is like the way that Joseph advised the Egyptians. They put a hole in the ground and that store the product for a long time. So that's the way they used to do that. So they said here it's not any issue on Shabbat. Basadeh lo atei le'ashvuyei gumot. If you talk about the field, one will not come to fill the hole because it's a we don't think that that's what people are going to do on Shabbat. Why? Because it's in the field. You pull out a cucumber from a field. So it's in the field and you have a hole in the field. So it's in the field, why do you care? Ha. But if it's babayit, if it's in a person's property, in his home, so you tell me, if your spouse see in a dining room a hole in the ground, in those days it wasn't flooring, right? What is she going to do? Most probably she's going to do mashve gumot, she's going to fill up that hole. And that's a derivative of boneh, of builder. Babayit atel ashvui gumot. So therefore, in a house, we are forbidden to pull this pole from the ground. Be'amine Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Yehuda bar Livai, klei kivai, kigon koved העליון וכובד התחתון, ma'u letaltelan b'Shabbat. He said, those, what happened to the weaver's tool, the upper and the lower beam of the loom. So can we carry them on Shabbat? Amar lei, Rabbi Yehuda bar Levi respond to Rabbi Yochanan, en metaltelin otam, you not carry them. Why? Matam lefi she'en nitalin, because they are usually not carried even during the week. Why? They are very heavy and considered fixed in their place. So that's it. So it's called kli shemelachto leisur, and it's only for the purpose of weaving and not for any other purposes. That's basically the point of Rashi, and the Rambam in Hilchot Shabbat chapter 26 said it clearly that the sages prohibited carrying them on Shabbat because of that. Mishnah. Now, since we talk about all this tying of clothing, now we continue in the preparation to Shabbat. מקפלין את הכלים אפילו 4 ו5 פעמים. Several things involved in washing and drying clothing, especially in old days before the time of the washing machine and drying machine. So one of the things they do is that you fold the garments. So the question is, can you fold and unfold a shirt, for example? So they said you can do it on Shabbat even 4 or 5 times. But what's the condition? You tell me. What's the condition? has to be
preparing it for Shabbat and not for use after Shabbat.
As long as you use it in honor of the Shabbat, lichvod Shabbat, Rashi said, and you intend to reuse them the same Shabbat, that's fine. That's fine. But Tosfot said to us here something very important. He said, "Mikan lamadnu," we derive from that the asur lekapel talitot, because it's for tomorrow. In other words, if you have the talis on Shabbat, you cannot. If you pay attention after the service, I never fold the talit, right. And that's the first thing I'm doing right after the Havdalah. You see here the source in the Tosfot. He said that's derivative in a practical halacha nowadays, that we do not fold the talis on Shabbat. So they said, the next thing the Mishnah said, usually we don't pasken halacha according to Mishnah, but that's, in that sense, is derivative from that.
So you don't put it back in your tally bag?
You can put it back, but you don't fold it the beautiful way, the way that you fold it after using it during the week. Okay? ומציעין את המיטות מלילי שבת ללילי שבת, אבל לא משבת למוצאי שבת. Again, it's not only for the fastidious people. Some people make sure after they leaving the bed, they setting them for the next time they need to use it. They set it up beautifully. So they said, as long as you do that for the purpose of Shabbat, for example, you wake up on Shabbat morning and you intend after the middle meal of Shabbat to go back and rest, that's fine. Because anything that is in honor of the Shabbat, it's fine. But you cannot do that in preparation for after the Shabbat. That's a problem. The Shulchan Aruch Harav said in Orach Chaim, chapter 302, that all of that is rabbinic. And he said that the prohibition is only if it's solely for something that it's need after Shabbat. But if this bed, for example, it's in a dining room, or it's in a place that it's a very uncomfortable for people to leave it like that, then he said it's fine to set it up nicely, because it's considering, Magen Avraham also said it's Tzorech HaShabbat, it's part of have the joy of Shabbat, so that's fine. The Rambam said that it's all speaking here about those bed, not for like couch in a living room or dining room or things like that. It's something that you use for sleeping, like regular bed, because in those days, if you look at the Passover Haggadah, people recline on a couch, which is very different than this one. Anyway, רבי ישמעאל אומר, מקפלין את הכלים ומציעין את המיטות מיום הכיפורים לשבת. Rabbi Ishmael have a very important category. He said, when it's come Shabbat and Yom Kippur, Shabbat it's always above even Yom Kippur. Why? Because if someone does a type of work on Shabbat, he can have the punishment of skila, versus if someone does something in Yom Kippurim, so they said is karet, that soul shall be cut off, which means that is a heavenly punishment, is a lower category than skila, which is the highest level, like stoning. That's the highest. So therefore he said, when it's come to compare Yom Kippur to Shabbat, one may fold the garment and make the beds from Yom Kippur in preparation for Shabbat, if Yom Kippur occurred on Friday, and also v'chelvei Shabbat, it was leftover fat from the sacrificial offering of animals that they didn't put yet the incense, so you're allowed to use it from leftover on Shabbat, krevin b'yom kippurim. You can bring them on Yom Kippur that occurred on Saturday night. אבל לא של יום הכיפורים בשבת, which means if Yom Kippur occurred on Friday, you cannot use those fat of the offering on Shabbat. רבי עקיבא אומר, לא של שבת קרבים יום כיפורים ולא של יום כיפורים קרבים בשבת. רבי עקיבא hold that even in regard to fold garments preparing the bed. He said, that's what the Meiri tells us, that you cannot do neither way, not from Yom Kippur Shabbat, not to Shabbat Yom Kippurim. Amre devei Rabbi Yanai, lo shanu ela be'adam echad, אבל בשני בני אדם לא. All of that apply when one person is folding the garment alone on Shabbat. But if there are two people, it's different story, because two people fold the garment is in tantamount to repairing the garment. So if that's the case, then Rashi said that's the problem, because it's really called metaken kli. It's really fixing a tool under that category. ובאדם אחד אנם לא אמרן אלא בחדשים, אבל בישנים לא. When we say that it's permitted in one person, that apply only, it's a brand new garment, that it's in a sense very easy to fold. But the old garment, that it's much harder to call all those wrinkles, all those things involved in folding, so that's it's called tikkun chashuv. It's much serious, and that's forbidden. Rashi explained that in those type of garment takes much longer to fix. ולא שנו אלא בלבנים, אבל בצבועים, וחדשים למה לא אמרן אלא בלבנים, אבל בצבועים לא. That brand new, we talk about white, but someone that is color, that's again, that's not part of our discussion. ולא אמרן אלא שאין לו להחליף, אבל יש לו להחליף, לא. We said it's only allow if you have no other garments. So again, for the honor of Shabbat, we allow it. Otherwise, not. תנא של בית רבי ישמעאל, הם מקפלים כלבן שלהם לפני שעליהם להחליף. In the house of Rabbi Ishmael, they did not even fold the white garment because they had others into which they could change. אמר אבונה, אם יש לו להחליף, יחליף. אם אין לו להחליף, ישלשל בבגדיו. So Avuna said, if you can switch garments, you should switch, but if not, you take the garments and make it like a robe, like a long garments. Now, a little bit history. In those days, they used to go in a very long robe, and that was the societal. Rabbi Yonatan Milunil said that was the societal sign of wealth, which means people who are wealthy used to wear these long robes. So he said that you're allowed to do it on Shabbat. מתקיף לרב סברה ואב מתחזק כדמות רוחה. This guy may be poor, and now what he is doing on Shabbat, he's wearing this long robe, so everyone thinks that he is rich. Rambam said in Hilchot Deot chapter 4 that the person should not pretend or to do something that looks arrogant or look above others. A person should not do this type of things. So they said, כיוון דכל יומא לא כאביד והאינת בכאביד לא מתחזק כדמות רוחה. Usually people don't do that, but he does that now. So people understand that he does that not because he's rich, but because he do that in honor of Shabbat. Again, you have to remember the mindset of society. It's like if you read the history of the Jews in Arab countries, it wasn't any type of a Holocaust that happened to the Ashkenazic Jews. However, it was some type of denigration of the Jews. You cannot build the synagogue the same heights as a mosque. You cannot dress or shave the same as local people, which means they're demonizing you, but they don't kill you, they're just demonizing you because that's part of the societal. So you see from here another source that is a long robe, it was a sign for wealthy. But again, in this situation we said it's not something that the person pretend or being arrogant. Now they said, now we go a little bit to Midrash. One of the lines we said in Shabbat, it's a line from Isaiah 58. We said it always in Shabbat morning. People are wondering why I'm saying so long the prayer before I said Bore Prayer Gafen. So that's the lines from Isaiah. So they said here, V'chibadto me'asod drachecha, and you honor it by going your own way. It means וכיבדתו שלא יהיה מלבושך של שבת כמלבושך של חול. That part of the honoring Shabbat, you should wear a clothing that it's different than the clothing during the week. So the Rabbi said it means that your garment should be nice, and your garment should be different. People, if you look carefully, people, some people wearing jeans during the week, right, and wearing different garments. Come to Shabbat, you see them like an angels. They dress properly in honor of Shabbat. It's all sign of respect for the gift of Shabbat. וכי רבי יוחנן קרא למנת די מכובדתי. He called his clothing, his garment, something that makes an honor. The way that they bring the honor, the respect for Shabbat. מעשו דרכיך, שלא יהיה הילוכך של שבת כהילוכך בחול. That you should not walk and run the same as during the week. So there are two things. Number one is the mitzvah to do laundry in honor of Shabbat, before Shabbat. But also, the way that you walk, the walking should be different than walking during the week. Soon you see examples. ממצוא חפצך, חפציך אסורים, על חפצי שמיים מותרים. So it means that talking about business on Shabbat, that's forbidden. But if you need to discuss with someone a collecting fund for the poor, or Rashi said, if you want to make a shidduch, you want to set up a matchmaking. So part of setting up matchmaking is talking about the expenses. So Rashi said that that's something that you allow to do it. Vedaber davar, and speaking idle words. We just turn the page to 113b. שלא יהיה דיבורך של שבת כדיבורך של חול. דיבור אסור, הוא מותר. So they said that all this business talking on Shabbat is forbidden. But others, for example, thinking about business, that's one thing. But Tosfot said here something very beautiful. He speaks about Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, that he has either mother or relative. Here, in a simple way, it's a ima. That she was a girlish, she was talkative. So he said to her, Shabbatahu, today is Shabbat. So in other words, you have to be prudent with your words. You don't speak other thing. You can talk about. So he said, שאין כל כך לדבר בשבת כמו בחול. That you should not speak in Shabbat. He said, and they end up something interesting. The Tosfot said, ובירושלמי אמרינן, in Jerusalem Talmud, they said, בתורח התירו בשאלת שלום בשבת. Even greeting each other on Shabbat, saying hello and how you doing, they allow it just to make peace between people. In other words, the category of speaking on Shabbat should focus on Torah and spirituality and not vanity. So now the GEMARA asks, Bishlama lechulu lechaye. So now what we discuss, we understand. Ela shelo yelecha shel Shabbat k'lecha shel chol ma'hi. What does that mean, that you should not walk in Shabbat the same as the week? כי היה למר אבונה אמר רב, ואמרי לה אמר רב, רבי אבא אמר רב, הונה היה מהלך בשבת ופגע באמת המים, אם יכול להניח את רגלו ראשונה קודם שתעקר שנייה מותר, ואם לאו אסור. You walk in Shabbat and you see a שלולית, you see a little bit water, when it's a pouring rain. So basically, what are the chances? Either you jump over, or you circumnavigate. So they said, if you can put one foot and before the other one, so it's fine. The whole key is that you should not do a running on Shabbat. You should not jumping on Shabbat. The walk has to be in respect to the day. מתקיף לרב וההיכל לאביד. לקיף כמפש בהילוכה. ליעבד זימין דמתווספן מה יעבד אל די סחיטה. אלא בעיה כיוון דלא אפשר שפיר דמי. He said, look, if you ask me to jump, it's an issue. So you tell me to go around. You go around, again, I impose on myself much more on Shabbat, which again, it's not something, maybe if it's a big to-do. And if you tell me that the idea of getting in and coming out, a person can be sochet, which means you're squeezing the water out of the garments, and that's a derivative of melaben. So therefore he said, kevan de lo efshar, so because they shapir dami, that because it's no other way, so you can jump over, and that's truly. Ela, what does that mean? It should not walk the same as the week. He asked him, what's the halacha if one wants to jump higher? The average, the GEMARA said in Eruvin 42 that average is the size of amma. That's the jump. That's the average person in a size of amma. You see, this is about amma in the hand side. That's the size of average person walking. So they said, how about if person walk a little more than that? Amar lo v'chi bechol miutra, who allow you even during the week to do it, to take a very large steps. It reminds me a story about Moshe Feinstein. Someone came to him and asked him, can I hear music during the Sfira Ta'omer, during the Sfira? So Moshe asked him, before you ask him about Sefira, let's talk about music. Who told you that you're allowed to hear music? What type of music you're talking about? If you're talking about heavy metal rock, you're sometimes not allowed to hear it any time. So here he said to him, who told you that during the week it's allowed? שאני אומר פסיעה גסה נוטלת 1 מ-500 מאור עיניו של אדם, because I'm telling you that if someone does that, it's damaging himself if he's not walking properly. So this is a little more Kabbalistic. It's like sgula, that if a person drinks from the wine of the Kiddush, it brings back the eye. The Maharil said that when you look at the candles, when you make the first part of the Kiddush, the word ner is 250, and if you take the word nerot, it's more than double. So he tried to say that it's like coming back by looking at the candles, bringing back the ability to see. So in ancient time, in order to do some type of medicine, they used to use a ground like dust to eat it. Here it looks weird, but that's the part of the medicine in the ancient time. Amar lo v'chi bechol miutra. Who told you that even during the week you can do it, you can eat it? Shani omer bechol asur meshu malke. He says that if you eat it, you can damage your body. Amar Rabbi mikol haochel ma'afarash babel ki lochel m'sar avotav. So they said that someone eats from the ground of Babylon is like eating from his. So in the land of Israel they have a site that you know that's a burial site. So if someone needs to eat the dust from the ground, there's no fear that he may eat some part bone or some part of dead body. In Babylon it's different. ויש אומרים כאילו אוכל שקצים ומסים דכתיב וימח את כל היקום. אמר יש לקיש למה נקרא שמה שנער שכל מתי מבול ידרו לשם. So יש לקיש said that all those dead body from the great flood in the ancient Genesis, they all ran to Babylon. אמר רבי יוחנן למה נקרא שמה מצולה. Why Babylon called the word מצולה? מצולה it's like deep in the ground. שכל מתי בבל נצטללו לשם. It's playing with the Hebrew word, and they said that all the die in the flood sank there. ויש אומרים כאילו אוכל שקצים ורמצים. If someone eat from the ground, it's like he eat a abomination and creeping creatures. והוודא התמחוי, but most probably they're all under bodies purified and decomposed. אמרי כיוון דמלכי גזרו ברבנן. Because it's create damage for a person's body, the rabbis put a decree. דהוא גברא דאכל דגרגישתא ואכל תחלה וקדחו לתחלה בליבי ודמת. So it was a story that it was a fellow that ate a soil for medicine purposes, and he also ate cress, and the cress took root in the soil and was inside him and began to grow, and the cress punctuate his heart, and he died. It's like when you're kids, sometimes the mother said, don't eat this seed before you pull out the layer, because if you do that, a tree can grow inside your stomach, right? So it's the whole idea of being careful. Now, since we talk about the special garments that the person should wear, so now we bring from the book of Ruth. This is the Yomi preparing Ruth for meeting Boaz. So she told her, you shall bath, and you shall anoint yourself, and you shall put a robe. So Amar Rabbi Elazar, אלו בגדים של Shabbat. So Rashi here asked, what is she was naked that she asked her to wear all these garments? What's the purpose? So he said that it means that this is the Shabbat garment, and Naomi told her to wear in honor of the occasion. She should honor a special garment, the garment that she used for Shabbat. So they said in book of Proverbs, תן לחכם ויחכמו עוד אמר רבי אלעזר זורות המויה ושמואל הרמתי. They said the sentence Proverbs 9, give to the wise and you will become wiser. So that's applied to whom? So he said to the Moabite, the Ruth, and Shmuel, the prophet Samuel and Ramah, who received advice and added to it their wisdom. Ruth, an example, דילו נעמי אמרה כמה לך חצר וסך ושם שמלותייך עלייך וירד הגורן, ואילו בדלקטיבה תרד הגורן והדר ותעש ככל אשר ציוותה חמותה. Which means her in-law asked her to go down, and it looks like she is some type, sorry for the best the definition, like harlot, like prostitute. But she went down to the threshing floor, and afterward it say that they did according to what the mother-in-law told her. So Ruth decided to anoint herself in a threshing hole and not on the road, so that people will not meet her on the way and suspect that she is acting in immorality. שמואל דילו כלה ואמר שחביה קרא לך ואמר דבר השם כשמי עבדיך, ואילו בדידי כתיב ועבור ויתייצב ויקרא בפעם בפעם שמואל שמואל ואמרו שמואל דבר כשמי עבדיך ולא אמר דבר השם. So Shmuel, in the first stage when he was about to be a prophet, he wasn't the prophet yet, but he heard the voice of Hashem. So he went to Eli, the older one that was the high priest, and he asked him, I heard a voice and I'm scared, I don't know what is it. So they said in the first book of Samuel chapter 3 that Eli said, whenever you hear the voice, this is Hashem talk to you. So he said, hear because I hear you, and he doesn't say, speak Lord. So the Radak explained that he still thought that it's like an emissary, like it's an angel. He wasn't sure that it's really God talking to him, because he was a Tiron. He was the very beginning, early stage of prophecy. He doesn't recognize that this is really Hashem talking to you. A second one, in Rabbi Elazar Megillat Ruth, the drasha, he said, ותלך ותבוא ותלקט בשדה, אמר רבי אלעזר, שלחה ובאה והלכה ובאה, עד שמצא בני אדם מוגלים ללך עמהם. Because she was so modest, Ruth, so she went back and forth several times, because she wants to find a suitable people with whom to walk. ויאמר בועז לנערו הניצב על הקוצרים עם הנערה הזאת, Boaz said to the people around him, who is this girl? וכי דרכו של בועז לשאול בנערה? Boaz was the גדול הדור, was the head of the generation, so what he asking require about the young woman? So they said, אמר רבי אלעזר דבר חורמה רעה בה, שתי שיבולים לקטה, שלוש שיבולים לא לקטה. מתנית נתן דבר צנינות רעה בה, עומדות מועמד נפלות מיושב. There are two distinct school of thought. One said that he saw a special wisdom. The Maharsha said that he realized that she know halachot, which is that when it's come to leket, to take two and not more. Even you may say, Maharsha said that she have two reasons to do it, because one category to take for the poor is if someone is a convert. Another category if someone is pure, and she have both, so she may take more than two, but she took only two, which showed that she was modest and have a knowledge. The second one is the second version. He saw that she's modest because he saw how she collected the stock, how she sat and stand, and he recognized someone who followed the law of modesty. Again, he told her to stick with his girl. So what is that mean, that the Boaz habit to climb to women? What it means? So the Maharsha said that the language of Vedavak, to climb, it's start with Bereshit, Vedavak Beishto, and it's also said about Dinah, that Vatidbak Nafsho. So that's the language he wants mean to say that he has like a Ruach HaKodesh, he have the special divine providence. אמר רבי אלעזר, כיוון דחזה ותשק עורפה לחמותה ורות דווקא בה, אמר שר לי דבוקה בה. Because he realized that Orpah left, kissed his mother-in-law, and Ruth clung to her, so he said it's permitted to climb to a woman like this, which means he recognized that she's different. In my book Ruth Talk, I elaborate a lot on this. Anyway, ואומר לה בועז לעת האוכל כשהלום, אמר רבי אלעזר, רמז רמז לה, תדע מלכות בית דוד לצאת ממך תכתיב בהלום, שנאמר ויבוא המלך דוד וישב לפני השם ואומרים מי אנוכי השם אלוקים מביתי כי אהבתוני עד הלום. So he gave her a hint and he told her that King David is going to be your descendants. ודבל פיתך בחומץ, and he told her that you should put your bread and in a vinegar. So what it means? אמר רבי אלעזר, מכאן שהחומץ יפה לשרב. He says that if it's very very hot, the vinegar helps to preserve food. Rabbi Shmuel ben Nachmani אמר רמז רמז לה. He wants to imply something. He wants to tell her a hint. He said, בן עתיד לצאת ממך שמעשיו קשים כחומץ אומן ומנשה. I wish to have more time, but in general it was a king Menashe that went astray. The Book of Kings, the second Book of Kings, chapter 21, speaks about all the evil that all the king of Judah, and no one else was worse than Menashe. That he was long, and he was 52 years, and he did 55 years, and he did horrible. So one of the things Maharsha said that his deed is like a chometz, is like a vinegar, that he gets worse and worse and worse and rotten in his behavior. עתיד בן לצר אומן ומנשה that he was terrible. ותשע מצד הקוצרים, אבל אלעזר מצד הקוצרים ולא בתוך הקוצרים. So they said that she said among those who collect the harvest, so she would set aside beside the harvest is not part of them. אז מה זה שתתחלק? Again, he implied a hint that the kingdom of David is going to divide it between Rehovam and Yerovam. Rehovam is son of Solomon, and Yerovam ben Nevat was the one who instigated. And he gave her roasted grain, and she ate, and she was satiated, and she left some over. Amar Rabbi Elazar, v'tochal b'mei David, that she ate. It means it's a metaphor that she, because the Midrash said in a few places said that she survived many years, and she said in the inauguration of King Solomon. So it means that God blessed her Ruth with long life. So vatuchal, meaning that she ate the fruit of her hands, which is figuratively, it means in the days of David, b'mei David, v'tisba Shlomo, that she was satiated in the time of Shlomo, v'totar melchazkiah, that all these kings, either you said that they're all wealthy, and all the kings of the world used to bring them gift. That's what Rashi said. Which means that because Rabbi was descendants of David, that was the one who put together the Mishnah, and because he was wealthy, so that means that she have the nachas, the joy of continuation of even it was so much wealth in Persia at that time that even the one who in charge for the horses of Rabbi, he was richer more than the king of Persia, which means that they said, there's another way to explain it, that she ate in this world, she satiated in the world to come, in the days of Messiah, and the Vatotar, and the some left over in the future, in the end of the days. Dli bepiskia. First halacha is Shulchan Aruch halacha in 317. On Shabbat, one may tie a belt to a bucket that is permanently attached to a well. It is certainly temporarily not, because one will untie the belt after Shabbat to use to secure the garment, which is not the case with a rope. The next one is Aniva Ukshira. We explained it several times today in the shiur that a bow is not considered a knot and may tie on Shabbat, and according to opinion of the rabbis. And we explained in regards to bring a rope and a cow, and those, so they allowed to weaving a rope from his home on Shabbat and tie it to the cow, and the other end of the rope, and the upper beam and the lower beam of the weaver's loom may not be moved on Shabbat because they are fixed in their places and not usually moved, but the posts, but one may not move the post that support the loom's frame on Shabbat, because one will come to fill up the holes in the ground process the remove, and we explain that that's a part of Melechet Boneh. Mekaplim et hakelim. One may fold the garment. It's permitted to fold garment on Shabbat if all the following conditions are met, which means the clothing will be worn on Shabbat. One person's folded and the clothing is new and not previously laundered. The clothing is white and not color, and the person has no other clothing to wear. So if you follow this condition, it's okay. If even one of these conditions is not met, it is prohibited to fold the clothing. The Mordechai ruled that is permitted to fold clothes in a manner that is different from the way that they are typically folded. And later authority agree with the Mordechai. So again, if you see someone folding the talit, it may be folded in different way that he folded originally, so according to Mordechai it's fine. One may make a bed on Shabbat evening for use on Shabbat day, but one may not use it to Shabbat for the after Shabbat. Shinui Gadim, it's appropriate for one to have a special clothing on Shabbat. If one does not have a Shabbat cloth, then one should wear his garment differently, in a difference on Shabbat, to show the manner. Very important halacha, weekly matters on Shabbat. On Shabbat is prohibited to discuss weekly matters or prohibited activities. It is permitted to discuss this matter if they related to mitzvot. And he said, the Midrash tell us that Dibur, even the talk, Shlo Diburcha b'Shabbat. So the Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 307 said, on Shabbat is inappropriate to speak details about matter unrelated to mitzvot. For example, speaking one business is prohibited. Mundane speech giving pleasure is permitted on Shabbat, but nevertheless, even the speech should be limited on Shabbat. The Mishnah Berurah said, and it is prohibited to speak about matter that cause one pain on Shabbat. Although it is prohibited to speak about certain matter on Shabbat, there is no prohibition against contemplating weekly matter. However, in the interest of experiencing a pleasurable Shabbat, it's fitting to stringent to avoid thinking about weekly matter as well. So again, we explain that that's all matter of Shabbat, and the less halacha of today, it's a important halacha of a psi'ah. So we say that one may not take large steps on Shabbat, which means longer the cubit, because one should avoid taking large steps during the week because it's harmful to one's health, but on Shabbat it's inappropriate. So youngsters who enjoy running are allowed to, so even to do it lechatchila, Magen Avraham said. But in general, the walking on Shabbat should be very respectful and different than the week. It's all in honor of Shabbat.